variety and adaptation, the other more straightforward, but not less powerful.
Yeah, there was some debate, of course, before Silver Tempest of which of these Lost Zone decks was the best. We're going to see here today who is on top with some new cards added in. Excited to see both these top-level players trying to lock up a 3-0 here early on in Latin America.
Yeah, I know, like, starting a tournament 3-0 always gives you some really good feelings. Going into a lunch break undefeated, it really sets up the rest of your day.
Well, we are underway. It looks like Marco is going to be starting things off here with the Comfey, finding the Temple of Sinnoh, which has been beneficial against a lot of lists. In here, we see at least the capture energy for Azul could be affected.
Yeah, I think playing it down immediately in this matchup really shows how it's not going to be super relevant. When you see a Comfey, you know decks are going to be based on a lot of basic energy. So Temple of Sinnoh not going to be very impactful. It's more important for Lugia or Regigigas matchups. And we do see Luminion being played. Interestingly, with Marco going first, they won't be able to use it right now.
Yeah, just finding a supporter, I suppose. Get that into the hand, holding on to the Colress's Experiment for turn number 2. But yeah, certainly an interesting call to start things off. Maybe the only Pokemon to be placed on the bench, perhaps?
Possibly. Luminion is actually a really good attacker in Lost Box decks because you can immediately shuffle it back into your deck, meaning you get to reuse it, and it's also not a liability in play. And also, Lost Box decks do not tend to play, if they even play Marnie at all, and they definitely don't play them in higher count. So that's like a calculated risk you can take to where, okay, I know I'm going to use this Colress next turn, and I probably know that my opponent will not be able to do anything about it.
That is correct. We see here there is no real way to disrupt the hand in Azul's side. Just going to be focused on his own strategy here to start things off. Turn number 1 here with that Colress's Experiment. The best way to start a turn with a Lost Zone deck.
Indeed, and Azul definitely really wants to get those going because his main threats will be powered up by Mirage Gate, right? He will probably lead with Cramorant, but afterwards he definitely wants to use Sableye, try and get those extra prizes, and he will be able to set up bigger threats, especially the Kyogre, to try and close out a game with that big attack.
Yeah, the Kyogre is phenomenal. Of course, trying to get as many cards out of the deck as possible so that eventually you can set up for an Aqua Storm and just have a bunch of water energies there by way of an energy recycler, which we see 2 of in this deck. So a very uncommon strategy, which could lead to some great results here if it ends up working out.
Yeah, that Aqua Storm is definitely Azul's ace in the hole, I would say, especially because Marco is playing V Pokemon, right? Which Azul is too, but not in the same amounts and doesn't rely on them as much as Marco does in this matchup. So it'll be interesting to see if Azul can pull it off and also if Marco expects it, because this is game 1. And that's not necessarily a card that you immediately jump to if you see the style of deck that Azul or the cards that Azul has played so far.
Yep, of course, to speak on that Kyogre Aqua Storm, discard the top 5 cards of your deck and then choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. This attack does 50 damage for each energy you discard in that way to each of those Pokemon. So we could definitely see multiple Pokemon V falling if upwards of 4 or 5 energies are targeted on that turn.
Now, one thing not really going Azul's way is that he's finding a lot of energies right now, but you really want to have access to them in your discard pile in order to be able to shuffle them back when the Aqua Storm times come, right? So that's going to be, there's already 2 in the Lost Zone, so it could be a little problematic for Azul to pull that off, but that will happen until the very late game.
Yeah, we do see that Radiant Greninja coming down, a great way to make sure the energies are in the right place, as you were saying. Just knowing where they are can be beneficial. Doesn't really matter what typing they are. We see the Lightning coming down, a tech for the Raikou that's involved in this list. Obviously terrified of those Lugia players.
Right, Raikou is a pretty good attacker on its own. We did see Suicune, which has the exact same attack, have some success last season. It definitely got power crept by Palkia V-Star. However, Raikou is definitely a pretty good card right now given Lugia.
Absolutely. We do see Azul using the Oranguru and just going to manually retreat to his Cramorant and take a nice KO here early on that Comfey for free.
Now, very interesting to see that Azul, with very little information on Marco Cifuentes' side on the board, he did bench that mana fee, and that shows how Azul, just by looking at the water energy attached to Lumineon, he can immediately infer that they're playing Radiant Greninja. So Azul really need to protect their bench, because the advantage that he has is the single prize base deck, and he really cannot let Marco take 2 prizes in one turn to compensate for that advantage.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just making sure that if prizes are to fall, just make it one at a time. Make sure that you know how the prize exchange is going to go about, and do not allow multiple cards like those Comfeys to fall. It leads to some really awkward positions, and it's so much harder to get through your deck if you have no Comfeys.
Right, and there we see the Radiant Greninja. So Azul, being the experienced player that he is, you can easily make this educated guesses, right, based on previous information, studying the metagame, knowing what your opponents are probably playing. Then you can prepare for those situations just by looking at a single energy in play, which is really, really impressive. It could have been any lost zone-based deck, but Azul immediately infers that at the very least, he needs to protect himself against Radiant Greninja.
Yeah, these are the plays we expect to see out of Azul GG time and time again. Proving how talented of a player he is here on the biggest stages we have. Marco, of course, trying to continue to build on their legacy as well. Going to need a few more cards in the Lost Zone to really get things going. Just 3 so far, and Energy Acceleration really doesn't occur until 7.
Indeed, and what Marco really needs is a response to that Cramorant. If he can't take a return KO, then he's falling a little behind, and we see the Snorlax Pass. That's Marcos's way to try and prevent a KO from Azul this turn.
Yeah, the Snorlax can certainly be beneficial against a deck like this. Having the unfazed Fat to help out in some situations, preventing all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon, except, of course, that damage. And that means that Cramorant is probably going to have to attack into the Snorlax, or we're going to target the bench. And sure enough, there is that escape rope.
Yeah, and Marco being very well protected from the escape rope to prevent that prize guard, and Lumineon is a Pokemon that can soak up some damage and then return to the deck with its attack. So that's going to be very crucial for Marco to prevent Azul from taking those prizes later on.
Yeah, we see Marco is at 4 on that Lost Zone counter, so perhaps a Colress's Experiment down the road, maybe Lost Vacuum or one more Comfey, would be able to help out this Lumineon into attacking on the next turn, absorbing some damage and dealing it as well would be very powerful here to help to clean up this prize exchange right now that isn't currently in Marco's favor.
Now, we do see that Marco is playing Manaphy in his list, so that does mean that Azul's Aqua Storm strategy might not be as effective as he would like it to be, or at the very least, he's going to have to aggressively target down that Manaphy in order to be able to pull it off. However, also Marco doesn't know that Azul, at least he doesn't know yet, that Azul is playing that Kyogre, so we have some mind games happening here between both players.
Yeah, I don't think I'd necessarily suspect the Kyogre, seeing this board state right now, but maybe some information has passed hands as the tournament's progressed. We'll see if maybe there's some play around it. Maybe we don't see multiple Vs down at the same time, but Azul is not considering any of that right now. It's just thinking, I got to burn cards. And sure enough, the Pokestop comes down. We see 2 items into the hand, and the Comfey helping out getting some additional cards into that Lost Zone.
Yeah, we are seeing that Lost Zone count going up for Azul this turn. We will surely see it for Marco as well. And I think Azul's really trying to figure out, okay, attacking into Lumineon is probably a waste of a turn, so what can I do about it, right? Do I risk powering up the Raikou V and putting a V in play? Do I just hit in with the Cramorant, which is essentially a lost turn? Do I do something different? There's so many options for Azul, but a lot depends on the resources that you have access to in your hand. I think Lost Box decks in general struggle a little bit to find the right Pokemon at the right time because they need that Quick Ball or they need that Capture Energy, and Azul has already exhausted 2 of them.
Yeah, just burning through the deck, trying to find the right cards. We could even see potentially something like Comfey stay in the active spot. Just really depends on how these next few cards settle in. And it looks like Azul is going to just bring up this Cramorant. Spit Innocently, a possibility, which kind of falls in line with Marco's plan, but Marco does only have those 4 cards in the Lost Zone, so it seems reasonable.
Indeed, because with the Luminion being active and Marco sitting at only 4 cards in the Lost Zone, that means he does need to find the Colress Experiment. And he does need to find a way to switch out into a Comfey to get another card in the Lost Zone and then be able to...
This hand! Multiple Mirage Gates. Looks like an Energy Recycler, Ordinary Rod, Sableye. What are these cards doing?
Geez, there's really not a lot of options here for Marco, and the Flower Selecting didn't really help his case either, so it seems like Marco's just going to lose another turn here, unfortunately.
Wow. Yep, that is terrifying. Just trying to find anything at this point. Colress's Experiment would have been incredible with the Mirage Gates in hand. Instead, looking like a very slow turn here, and Azul really picking his spot wisely, getting that damage onto the Luminion and not being punished whatsoever.
And now Marco is drawing a few cards here and there with the Radiant Greninja, with the Comfey, but unfortunately his hand has not really improved, and he's not quite at the spot where he can use Mirage Gate. We see the Luminion in play, so this Ultra Ball can't really fetch anything to help him find that Colress, unfortunately.
Yeah, Radiant Greninja getting closer to the answer, but still not there. Some switching effects perhaps would have been ideal. Just really can't find the right cards here, and the Ultra Ball is going to continue searching, maybe find one other card. Is there an Oranguru or something to help out in a spot like this?
It doesn't seem like it. I think Marco is very limited this turn, unfortunately. That's one of the things about these Lost Zone decks. They rely so much on Battle VIP Pass, and if you don't get like a couple of them going on turn 1, then it's going to be really, really tough to get all your Pokemon into play, right? As I was mentioning with the Capture Energies, with the Quick Balls, that's really a big, big issue here.
Well, we do see the retreat for the turn. The Comfey comes down, and this will at least lead to number 7, I believe, into the Lost Zone.
Yeah, so that will activate Mirage Gate.
Finds an escape rope.
Now, I'm not sure if Marco retreated the Luminion that was active with the Water Energy at the start of the turn, and then he just retreated again with that Psychic Energy. I'm not sure if that happened.
That would make sense, as the energy's no longer on the Luminion, but
yeah.
Don't know how that exactly left the board. We'll have to see if the judges eventually catch something like that, or if maybe we just missed something. But here comes the escape rope, at least for the turn.
All right, so what does Azul bring up here? The Oranguru is the only Pokemon that survives a Cramorant hit, but everything in Marcos's board screams Luminion will be used, right? So we'll see. Now, we are seeing that retreating explanation.
Marco just showing the scoop up nets, saying that those were ways that the Pokemon were moved.
Yeah.
But we did see that energy come down to retreat the Comfey, so sure enough.
Right. The scoop up nets.
Something's off.
Yeah, the scoop up nets do work for Comfey, but they certainly don't work on Luminion as much as Marco would like it to at this point, to be able to heal and find a Colress. So
I think we'd see a lot more Luminion played if it was using scoop up nets.
So they are having that discussion right now over how that Luminion got to the bench.
Yeah, we also didn't see Marco use the Pokestop. Do you think that the situation was dire enough to maybe use a Pokestop in that situation?
I mean, the thing is, like, Pokestop, there's nothing that helps Marco find a supporter, right? Which is the Colress Experiment. And the Pokestop could discard a Colress in and of itself. So that could be...
maybe you find the switching cards that lead to the Comfey that finds it. I mean, I don't know if we're really that desperate right now. It's 6 to 5 prize cards, but you wonder sometimes.
Right, yeah, and that's where you wish sometimes you were playing Pokegear, or even Palpad to like have some sort of access to supporters after you have used Pokestop.
Yeah.
Pokestop is good, but it's not that good.
We have seen Regigigas players doing that strategy because the Pokestop is so crucial, and it also just doesn't care about throwing away resources. So when you do find that Pokegear, it just feels so sweet. But yeah, this is not a list that can afford to run it currently, it looks like.
Yeah, now with the bunch of Mirage Gates that Marco is holding in his hand, he'll certainly be able to utilize Luminion to attack and take a KO. However, you want to save those Mirage Gates for Giratina V, right?
Yep.
Otherwise, it's really difficult to power up, and having to use them now is not ideal for Marco's strategy.
Yeah, where is Giratina V? we have not seen it yet. We see a V star in the Lost Zone currently, but it has not made its appearance right now, and this is just a super Luminion deck currently, and I don't know if that's what gets to 3-0 right now.
Exactly. Like, obviously, Snorlax is a good attacker, Luminion is a good attacker, but unfortunately, Giratina is not very cost-effective, right? You have to Lost Zone 2 energies with Giratina V-Star's attack, and that's very resource intensive. And then 280 damage onto an 110 HP Cramorant or a 70 HP Comfey. That's really not the trade you want to do. And Azul is definitely never forced to bench a V Pokemon here.
Yeah, I don't necessarily expect to see Marco bringing the Giratina down until maybe the later stages of the game. Potentially, it's a Pokemon that could soak up some damage and take 2 knockouts in exchange. You try to make use of those single prize Pokemon, or of course, that Luminion chain that you were mentioning. Just try to take these single prize Pokemon out of the game while only losing a single prize yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And like, Giratina can try to act and deceive people into thinking you're a single prize deck, but it can only do it for so long. Yeah, the last few prizes will definitely be taken by Giratina V-Star, and when you have to put those V Pokemon in play, then you start having bigger risks in play, which you don't want to have, especially against single prize Pokemon such as Azul's that can 1-KO them back.
Yeah, we've seen early in matchups like this just the benefit of having that Snorlax down early and often, getting some big knockouts on Pokemon like the Cramorant, on Pokemon like the Radiant Greninja. If you can remove the Pokemon that deal outright damage, then what's left to knock out your Snorlax in an early board state like this?
Exactly. No matter how beefy that Snorlax can be, it's going to be quite the conundrum for Marco to figure this one out.
Well, the judges are trying to figure out what exactly to do right now with our players, with the issue. We'll see how that actually lines up here, but of course we're going to give these players and judges the time to resolve this.
Of course, we will certainly compensate for the time that is being lost in this back and forth, and we'll have to see what the resolution is to this issue. Obviously, you can only retreat once per turn. That is part of the rules. It used to be, however, that you could retreat as many times as you want. I don't know if you remember those times, Kyle. Back in 2000s, 1999s, I'm old enough to remember. I did. That's when I started playing, basically. Yeah. So I distinctly remember being able to retreat my baby Pokemon and my Cifuentes as many times as I wanted. That, unfortunately, is no longer possible now.
Yeah, I think I had the Scyther going on in my Haymaker, and I was bouncing around a lot, so I may have only been 8 or 9 years old, but it was a thing.
Well, I was only 12. Yeah, I'm not that old.
Well, we see there are some questions right now that the judge has to look in on. There's just double checking, was the retreat happening multiple times? Potentially a Comfey was used twice, just checking to see what exactly happened here, to see what the possible resolution here is in game number 1 of round 3.
Yeah, we're always trying to maintain the integrity of the board as much as we can, and of course there's so many things going on, and especially with these decks, you have to keep track of the Lost Zone, keep track of which Comfey abilities you have used, which what's in your discard, what's in your opponent's discard. So there's so much happening back and forth that it is easy to sometimes lose track of a few things. But thankfully, that's why we have judges. We're also looking at the game very closely. So between all of us, we should be able to figure it out.
Yeah, we've mentioned earlier that Marco Cifuentes has really been making a name for themselves just on the online scene. We've seen in the Players' Cup and in so many of these online tournaments, name continually pops up in those top 8s. And that is one benefit of playing online is it won't let you mess up.
Right, those sort of mistakes, I can definitely tell you that coming back into live play when tournaments restarted in Salt Lake City back in March, I could definitely tell like I was not out of shape, but out of like practice for sure.
Right.
I was too used of 2 years of only clicking and my deck being very neatly arranged when I was looking through it and taking prizes to the point where when I sat down, like I've been playing for 20 years, I've been taking prizes for 20 years, and I forgot for the first time in my life to take a prize card after I knocked out a Pokemon, and that cost me a whole round.
Jeez. Yeah, that is unfortunate. I've been playing almost as long as you. Maybe I've taken prize cards a couple less years. There were some down years in there, of course, where things weren't going my way. But yeah, it looks like after the illegal retreat, there was a flower selecting that happened. So the head judge is going to come down and take a look at the board state, the situation here, and try to find the best resolution here in a timely manner for us.
Yeah, of course. Like I mentioned, there's so many things going on that it's easy to miss on some things. And online, the game will not let you use an extra ability. The game will not let you retreat twice, right? It's literally not programmed, so you cannot make that mistake. And yeah, being able to do these things in real life and be very clear about your sequencing and the process you're going through, that's very important for the communication for both players and the judges and ourselves.
Yep, and it's of course it's a long tournament. And this is just the start of it, but players like these generally have their eyes set on some future rounds, and maybe in the early games you're not really thinking exactly about these smaller sequences here, and that can be punishing at times when you just slip up and miss a retreat.
Yeah, these little things can end up snowballing into, now we've seen an extra few cards from an ability, we've shuffled the deck with Emerashcade, so we'll have to see if there's a way to reverse this, which I believe there will be, as long as we can determine the flower selecting cards, and we can just put the energies back and shuffle, but we'll have to see what the head judge determines here.
Yep, it's one of the benefits of playing on stream is that we can always rewind the tape and take a look. Judges can try to build the board state back to what it was and try to make this game playable once more. It's a little tougher, of course, with just like the amount of time it takes. You want to make sure you get everything perfect, and both these players don't gain an advantage that's unnecessary right now. So we'll just leave that in the capable hands of our head judge.
Yeah, we are seeing a little bit of rewinding going on the table. So we are definitely actively trying to fix all these small things, and we'll see how the game plays out from here and if there's any penalties for either player.
Yep. So if you're Azul and you're looking at this very awkward situation unfolding on the other side of the table, how do you keep your composure? How do you continue to focus on the winning strategy we're getting towards?
I mean, having been exactly where Azul has been in the last few years, like I've made mistakes on stream, my opponents have made mistakes on stream. I think everyone's concern is always like to prevent these sort of things, right? You want to win on the table. You don't want like penalties or things like that to be the decisive of the match. But unfortunately, like gameplay can go by so fast, and you're sitting there with the white noise on your headphones, like there's so much going on, right? So I think Azul's main thing right now is to like, he knows he has an advantage right now because Marco did not attack in the last couple of turns, and Azul has already taken that first prize card. So as long as he keeps up what he's doing right now and he maintains the pressure, then he'll be in a very good position.
Yeah, well, with 10 extra minutes of white noise potentially blaring in his ears, we'll see if Azul does continue to play out this game in a winning fashion. It looks like the board state certainly is favoring Azul right now, and potentially some penalties would also assist in that as we do see the players here actually picking up the cards.
Picking up, yeah. So Not sure. Yeah, the player Marco seems to have chosen to concede. I imagine that penalty would have been like a 2-price penalty,
Yeah.
which means Azul would have only needed to take 3 prize cards now instead of 5. And with Marco being so far behind, it's going to be really difficult to compensate for that. And so it's better to just refresh, restart onto game 2, where Marco gets to choose who goes first and see what happens.
Absolutely agree with the play here from Marco, just making sure that when we do play in game number 2 and hopefully game 3 for his sake, that there's enough time on the clock. None of this time here in finding a resolution to game number 1 will be impactful, as we're going to just add that time back onto the clock here for these players. So we should have a very exciting game number 2 here as these players start to draw their hands, and we will see which of these Lost Zone decks has what it takes to move on in the tournament to at least 3-0, potentially that 2-1-1, who knows?
Yeah, and now we're in a very interesting situation here with both decks being able to get an attack off on turn 1 with Cramorant. This is a big question that I've always had a difficult time answering, rather, which is like, do you choose to go first on the decision to like be able to further your setup, get some cards in the Lost Zone with a couple Comfeys and then pass, or do you choose to go second, hoping that you'll have a good enough hand to be able to pull off that turn 1 attack and take a knockout on your first turn?
As the Lost Box player, the Cramorant, or as the Giratina?
As either, because both have access to Cramorant.
Yeah, I feel like as the player, as Azul's deck, maybe not as focused on the heavier attackers in the late game. It's a little more likely that you could find an opportunity to get that Cramorant down and get the 4 energy attack. So I can see that happening, but Marco obviously has the threat of the prize exchange on that side. So maybe being the one who gets the first attack off could be beneficial here for Marco.
Indeed, and it seems Marco actually chose to go second to be able to have that possibility, as we do see Azul start with that Battle VIP Pass, which is always, when you see Battle VIP Pass in your starting hand, you're always so happy and you feel like at least you're going to be able to play the game.
Yeah, it is a very good card. Being able to just take these basic Pokemon out of your deck so you're not worried about where they are. Then, of course, the fact that most of them are usually Comfeys, they're going to be leading to more cards. Yeah, the Radiant Greninja start to draw even more. This is as good as you draw up a turn 1 so far, and we haven't even seen more than 3 cards of this hand.
Yeah, so Marco's probably start with one of the worst starters he could get, even though he is playing a Giratina V-Star deck. You don't want to start with a Giratina V. We saw last game he was actively not going for it or searching for it or benching it if he had it. And so it doesn't really play too well into the Cramorant KO. And Azul also started with one of the best possible Pokemon, where with that Greninja in the active, Cramorant cannot get a KO. So things are not going so hot for Marco in this game too.
Yeah, asking a lot of Marco's deck right now. No real way to move the Giratina. Of course, you've got some of the switching effects, but mainly you're focused on the scoop up net engine and the Comfeys. So having this Giratina down, it is going to be at least stuck on the bench at some point, and that's just a very easy target for Azul to soften up. We could see multiple ways of doing that. The Sableye can be beneficial there, even one Cramorant hit early in the game, or that Radiant Greninja. Eventually, it all leads to that Kyogre just licking its chops, saying that is 2 free prize cards.
Exactly, and we haven't seen the Kyogre yet, right? Marco might still not know it's a Kyogre deck, but he did have the clue in that Azul had used quite a few more water energies than you would expect, so he must be narrowing down the options that Azul has, and they can and are mainly for Radiant Greninja in the early game, but there must be something else, right, behind those water energy.
Well, we do see Azul start really just coming along here with the Cramorant down. Just the 1 card in the Lost Zone, but you have to feel good about this opening setup. Every Pokemon that you're looking for, the Manaphy to protect the bench, and well, on the other side, Marco does have that Battle VIP Pass. Yeah,
Battle VIP Pass, always the best card to find on turn 1 and the worst card to find after turn 1 because it's not useful at all. We'll have to see if Marco can do this thing that I was mentioning, attacking with Cramorant on turn 1, that's the ideal get ahead in the price cards, and especially since Marco now has a 2-price liability on the board, that's going to be essential for Marco to be able to win this game. Get that price trade going for him.
Well, eyeing up some important cards here to the setup. Going to be very similar to what we saw from Azul, that Radiant Greninja coming down, and that Comfey. We saw Marco looking at some cards like the Switch card, understanding that getting this Pokemon out of the active spot is going to be crucial to the setup here. We'll see what else is going on in this hand right now.
Yeah, we're going to start off with a concealed cards, see what other resources Marco has access to. And he's already holding the Manaphy in his hand, so it'll be interesting. Oh, he immediately plays it down to protect from the Radiant Greninja. And he's going to get some cards into Lost Zone with Giratina's attack.
Yeah, this is not exactly how you draw it up, but we are going to see the Abyss Seeking. Looking at the top 4 cards, I'm going to put 2 of those in the Lost Zone. It's like a bad Colress's experiment, I guess. But you know what? You got to do what you got to do on the opening turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And the main thing is getting those cards into a Lost Zone, but not getting that attack off after choosing to go second definitely sets Marco a little bit behind. That advantage that he was trying to give himself is no longer there, and now Azul will have the initiative.
Yeah, this is a big turn for Azul. Would love to see Colress's experiment as the supporter of choice. We will see that Comfey starting off with the flower selecting, going to drop a Scoop Up Net, and that's a really good card. You have to expect some other good ones to come down. And yes, there is the Colress's experiment.
Yeah, and that's the only time where you're happy to see Battle VIP pass after turn 1, when you can send that to Lost Zone immediately, makes your choices much easier with the Colress experiment, and adds to your Lost Zone count. So really happy to see that there from Azul, and we'll have to see what else he does this turn besides ending it with the Cramorant attack to get that initiative and start taking up those prize cards.
Yeah, we do see that magic number 4 already hit for Azul. Looks like plenty more choices potentially to make here. Just trying to figure out what's the most ideal route here. Going to use the Oranguru. Primate Wisdom.
Putting a Capture Energy at the top, which means if Marco were to use a Marnie, he would be guaranteed that Capture Energy, which guarantees another Cramorant or an extra Comfey for more flower selecting. So pretty nice to use that ability to protect yourself against those situations. And if they don't play Marnie, then you just get the card back anyways.
Yep, no harm, no foul. Just some nice manipulation of the deck. Legal manipulation. Love to see it. Down comes the escape rope here for Marco. Finally going to move that Giratina V, but a little later than he wanted.
Yeah, and we are going to see Azul promote the Comfey, which is very surprising. I think if you're in Azul spot and you're trying to prevent your opponent from taking prize cards, then the Oranguru or the Radiant Greninja would have been better, well, not better choices, different choices in order to try and prevent Marco from getting that initiative that he wanted to take with the choice to go second, and especially because Marco has now used by Seeking and therefore has more access to resources. So that's a very interesting choice by Azul.
Yep, we are going to see what Marco can come up with on this turn now. Ultra Ball going to discard one of these Giratina Vs. As you were saying, it's just not really the big attacker in this matchup right now, and unfortunate to see that the one that's going to be committed to already has that damage on board, but Lumineon is going to be the choice here. Of course, finding that Colress's experiment, just trying to get those cards into the Lost Zone, and we're getting close. There's a Comfey, and certainly 2 more cards hitting the Lost Zone right here, so you have to think 7 is on its way.
Yeah, for sure. 7 definitely seems achievable this turn with the correct combination of cards for Marco, and then that could lead to Giratina attacking to try and make itself more useful in case we don't see a Cramorant. We could also see the Lumineon attacking and also cycling back into the deck to make sure that you can use it again and not have that liability down. So we'll have to see what Marco is planning right here.
Looks like the Lumineon is going to be the choice, hoping to maybe just soak up some damage and just the pass of the turn here. So with 5 in the Lost Zone, Marco really hoping that this Lumineon can absorb and just retain the current board state and the prize exchange right now, which is at 6 and 6.
Indeed, it's with both players being able to attack for free with Cramorant, essentially. It's really interesting that we're on the third turn and neither player has taken a prize card. So we'll have to see how much longer it takes for either player to start this prize exchange. And I feel like once you get that first prize card, then everything starts snowballing from there, right? From both players, they both need to respond. And then the Roxanne timing for both will be very crucial.
Yep, you'd have to expect that Azul would be favored in a situation like that, could timely choose when to knock out that Giratina V-Star. And just going to continue pushing along right here. We do see the 6th card reaching the Lost Zone right now.
Yeah, Azul being very close to activating Mirage Gate, but at this point, with the Manaphy sitting on Marco's bench, there's not really a great target to Mirage Gate into, so getting to 7 is definitely not going to be super impactful right now, unless Azul's plan was to take down this Snorlax through Oranguru's attack or something. I don't see any benefit to Mirage Gate yet.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to go that far just yet, but yeah, it certainly is tricky. You see that Manaphy over there on the bench, and it means that getting some of those multiple knockout the kinds of exchanges, it's really just not going to happen with Radiant Greninja. It likely is going to just be Cramorant hitting multiple times into these Pokemon very awkwardly, and that makes this tricky.
Indeed, because Snorlax specifically can be scoop up netted back into the hand. It's not like Lumineon where you're forced to power it up to get rid of that damage, or Giratina where the damage is there essentially forever. You can scoop up net the Snorlax, remove that damage, and once again eliminate a turn, basically. So we'll have to see if Marco can pull that off and finally take a prize card himself.
Well, the cards certainly you'd think could be lining up this turn here for Marco. Has the 5 cards in the Lost Zone, really just hoping for a little assistance off the top of the deck. Escape Rope, depending on what cards are in hand, could be leading towards Comfey looking for a little more help, or the Lumineon getting aggressive, but it looks like some help is necessary here. Flower Selecting going to try, and I think that's the experiment.
Yeah, finally finds the Colress experiment, and that's the card that really puts Marco into the driver's seat now. He'll be able to activate Mirage Gate, start applying some pressure, and cycle back to Lumineon if he wishes, and finally get going with this.
We'll see what cards are selected here. At least getting past the threshold now for Mirage Gate is going to be so impactful. And
yeah,
you would think that the scoop up net would have been a really nice call on the Snorlax. I'm not seeing it just yet though, and that could be awkward where you want to commit the energies. It might just be Lumineon time.
Indeed. The best time to use Lumineon is when it's damaged, when it's soaked up some damage, but of course the escape rope made it so that the Snorlax ended up in the active. And so we will be seeing Lumineon finally take a prize card here for Marco, but at what cost? Yeah, like the Pokemon on the bench are damaged, and if Azul is able to find escape rope, then he'll be able to probably get a good target here. It's either you attack into the Giratina, you might be able to take down Radiant Greninja, limiting the draw, or even take down the Manaphy, which Azul really wants to get rid of.
Oh, there we do see that Aqua Return going to be taking the first prize card of game number 2 here for Marco. Azul now looking for an opportunity to strike back, and at least the Snorlax is willing with the damage already on board and the Cramorant ready to go behind this Comfey.
Yeah, so Azul has a way to tie up this game, and essentially if Marco didn't have a rule box Pokemon in play, then he would have the initiative and therefore the advantage as long as he was able to keep up these KOs. But with the Giratina sitting there on the bench, Azul must be pretty comfortable thinking, okay, I'm down a prize card and I don't have the initiative in the prize exchange, but as long as I can target down that Giratina eventually, even when Marco is at 1 prize card and I'm at 2, I'll be able to close out this game.
Yep, we'll see how all this works out here. So many cards in the hands right now. So many decisions to make.
Yeah, these decks really thrive on some decks really reducing the Marnie count. Yeah, especially the Lost Box decks. Since you have to focus on Color's Experiment so much, there's really no other supporter you want to play early on. And so in these matchups, you always get these humongous hands built up with a lot of options. But as we've seen from last game in Marco's case, he had so many cards in his hand, yet none of them were useful yet because of the delay of the Lost Zone cards.
Well, one other benefit that comes along with that is just the size of the deck going down over and over again, of course, favoring Azul in situations like this, just getting closer and closer to that win condition, which is a little more awkward with a Manaphy involved, but maybe getting the right Pokemon in the active spot could lead to a big 2-prize knockout.
Now, with 2 Ordinary Rod, Marco will be able to recover the Manaphy if he needs to. That is, if Marco assumes he'll need them, right? Because the Ordinary Rods, even though they are very good, sometimes you feel like you can take out one with the Flower Selecting or something. So we'll have to see if Marco gets the cue of, when Manaphy goes down, I need to immediately get it back.
Yep, that would be a very nice card to have in a situation like this. Just make use of the ability of this Snorlax. If you can continue to use it over and over again, it really is such an awkward Pokemon for Azul to try to fight through.
Yeah, there's no canceling Cologne. It's hard to... you're trying to get Color's Experiment, get access to more cards, so bossing it up is not always easy or ideal. Oh. And it also means... Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's what a Pokestop right there for Azul. Yeah. Finding 3 items, 2 of which were Mirage Gate. So eventually, if the energies want to come down, they should be available. Right there, we do see 5 basic energies ready to go by way of Energy Recycler.
Yeah, that Energy Recycler is essential to make that Kyogre very useful. And I think that's another cue, right? Even though Marco has not seen the Kyogre yet, and we haven't seen it either in Azul's hand or in play, that's definitely a big cue that the Kyogre is there, or something very energy intensive at the very least.
Yeah, something fishy's going on, and maybe Marco is starting to pick up on that, but at least it will not be this time around. We do see Azul working on that Sableye, needing to get to 10 cards into the Lost Zone for Lost Mine to distribute 12 damage counters.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see where he places them, but I would be very surprised if they go anywhere other than at least 7 going into that Manaphy. And that'll be the cue for Marco to think, oh, my opponent's actually actively targeting the Manaphy. Therefore, I really need to get it back as soon as possible.
Yeah, do I need to use the Ordinary Rod now on a Manaphy if that's the Pokemon to fall? Do I not have it for Snorlax later? If both these Pokemon aren't knocked out at the same time, it gets really awkward with how you manage those resources.
Ooh, however, Azul, playing around that Manaphy, apparently has taken down that Comfey and placed 1 damage counter on Greninja. That must mean he has 4 left, I believe, if that's 7 total.
Yep.
Definitely not what I expected. Maybe he's trying to be like, oh, I'm not super interested in knocking out your Manaphy. Like, I'll do it afterwards, and trying to be a little deceitful in a way.
Yeah, leave it to Azul playing hard to get here on the stream, round number 3.
Now, we are going to see Marcus's response. Of course, the Snorlax couldn't be targeted by Sableye thanks to its ability, and we are finally going to see the Snorlax attack and going to sleep, which is a very funny mechanic of Snorlax.
Certainly is, and yeah, this doesn't feel great having all of these energies played onto the Snorlax that's already damaged. It is unlikely that you'll get a second opportunity to use this Snorlax, but you have to knock out this Sableye. You've already seen how impactful it is, removing a Comfey and potentially the Manaphy on the following turn.
Yeah, now, the fact that Snorlax is already damaged means it will likely go down next turn. But if it wasn't, I think Marco would actually be in a very decent spot. However, since Snorlax does go to sleep and you have to flip double heads for it to be able to attack again, then it can be a little tricky to get that going once again.
Yeah, we could certainly see an issue with that, just depending on how resources are looking. If the switch cards don't line up, then maybe you just get stuck in the active spot in some situations. And with damage counters flying around, Yep, well, we do see that tail, so we certainly could run into a problem here.
Yeah, if that Snorlax stays in the active, then yeah, attacking for Marco back-to-back turns could be a little difficult. And I think this is the turn where Azul wants to be like, okay, this is when I want to take down that Manaphy, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a second Sableye placing damage counters around the board.
Yep, we do see the deck size for Azul is very low. Of course, plenty of cards in the hand, so potentially does have the reach right now for a Sableye.
Now, 10 cards in the lost zone for Azul, 8 cards in the lost zone for Marco. Marco is getting ready to use the V-Star attack for Giratina, which is a more cost-effective way to take down a single-price Pokemon. But it's still a little bit of a waste. It feels awful to use it on Pokemon that have barely 100 HP or less.
Well, here it is. Azul was able to find the psychic energy necessary, and Sableye is ready to go with that Lost Mine attack. The Snorlax is stuck right now as it is asleep and is going to need a little extra help to wake up. I don't think that Azul's going to do any favors here.
Yeah, and if the active Pokemon is asleep, there's no need to worry about it, right? And there's only a 25% chance for Snorlax to go down. So we do see the damage on the Manaphy being piled up finally. Now that that's down, Azul could play the Kyogre next turn and sweep up Marco's bench.
Important to note that Sableye could not affect the Snorlax right now, even if it wanted to. So expect these damage counters to go to the rest of the bench right here.
Yep, that's 7 more on Giratina, placing it at 200 damage. Well, 60, actually. So still 1 damage counter left. Yeah, which goes on to Greninja, putting it in range of Cramorant. So Azul really setting up everything to be able to get knocked out very easily, either by Cramorant or a sweeping win by Kyogre, sorry.
We do see the tails once more. Snorlax will be asleep this turn, unless Marco has some items to help out.
And I don't see much in his hand to be able to retreat. I know he plays Switch Card, which was a very interesting inclusion given that Giratina V-Star can't retreat, but I guess Giratina V-Star comes into play so late that it's not that big a deal. Now we are seeing the Ordinary Rod, as I mentioned, recovering that Manaphy, and like I said, when your opponent knocks out that Manaphy, then that's your cue to immediately try and find it again. The question is, will Marco be able to?
Right. You of course want to do this on a turn that you're also knocking out the Sableye, because if you're just going to bench the Manaphy, what did you really accomplish? They're just going to knock it out again with Lost Mine.
Exactly, and now we do see the Scoop Up Net getting that Snorlax back, but you don't get the energies back. So that's 3 energies discarded, a Mirage Gate that you utilize to power it up. It's really not that cost effective, so that might end up... It's a lot of resources that Marco is going through, and he's barely taking 1 prize per turn.
Yep. We just saw that Ordinary Rod, and those are some energies that are going to have a hard time finding their way back into the deck if the resources aren't there to bring them back.
Exactly. Now, Marco can attack with Snorlax again. He is holding a Mirage Gate, but he actually chooses to use it now, probably to power up that Giratina. I don't think there's any other viable attacker that we could see. Comfey certainly is not a good attacker in this spot. So attacking with your damaged Giratina, it will get you a prize card, but it's going to be really difficult to close out this game if you're Marco.
Yep, you have to start thinking maybe this is a pathway to Roxanne at some point. If you're going to be using this Giratina V-Star right now, your opponent's easily going to take those prize cards, and then maybe you can set up one last play with that Snorlax and a bad hand for Azul.
Exactly. Now, the question is, how many energies does Marco have left? How many Mirage Gates does he have left? So it's going to be a pretty difficult close of the game for him with how many resources he's already expended and not having gotten very far, unfortunately, in terms of the prizes he's received for them.
Yep, we will have to see as this game progresses. I'm not seeing too many valuable resources in the hand right now for Marco, so maybe some help from the prize cards or the top of the deck, but at least the Roxanne is in there, so some disruption that maybe Azul wasn't exactly expecting.
Yeah, now with those two energies in the Lost Zone, Marco will now have access to the V-Star, making it much easier to attack. But since the Giratina is in range of the Cramorant, I really don't see Giratina surviving this turn. And then you have to ask, what's the follow-up? Yeah, Sableye can get you two prizes, potentially with a combination of Zigzagoon, but will that be enough?
Yeah, it's you're asking a lot right now of your deck when all of your resources are slowly dwindling away. Azul is going to try to piece together a knockout, and it's a little awkward right now with the way the damage is placed out. Of course, if there was a little more, maybe we could see something heroic like the Manaphy fall and the Giratina V-Star, but just not enough damage counters to work with the Sableye. Probably going to have to piece together a knockout here on the Giratina, and then Kyogre just really can't do its job because of that Manaphy coming back from the Ordinary Rod.
Yeah, Marco really, with good intuition, not seeing the card, but figuring it out based on what Azul has played, the way he has played, and the amount of water energies in his deck. So that will be a little difficult for Azul to get those last few prizes, and he's already exhausted both of his Sableyes. Now, he could put them back right now and try to target down the Manaphy that way, but once again, Marco has a second Ordinary Rod that he could find, and therefore get the Manaphy back out once again.
Yep, looks like that is going to be what's lined up here for Azul. Just now determining what other energy card to go along with this. Multiple Sableye coming back into the deck. And if the Manaphy were to fall, maybe the Kyogre lines up the knockout with not that many energy requirements. Just two energies off the top, and a Rangaroo would really help out in a situation like that to take a 3-prize knockout and close out the game.
Yeah, Rangaroo guaranteeing at least 50 damage for Kyogre is really good. And with the Giratina presumably gone this turn, then you don't need all 5 energies, right? So that will make it easier to pull off. The question is, well, is that Azul's endgame situation? Is it just attacking with Sableye, the second one that he just put back into the deck? It's going to be an interesting management of resources for Azul to be able to close out this one.
Well, all of the situations that we brought up are also kind of similar with the Radiant Greninja. If a knockout were to happen right here on the Manaphy, maybe you target down Sableye and Comfey. I don't think the knockout's necessarily lined up for the Giratina just yet, but there are options there. And of course, you could just be baiting currently. You have this Pokemon that looks threatening, and they're like, oh, well, I'm played around that. And then sure enough, the Kyogre comes down with the last bit of energies and cleans up.
Yeah, there we are seeing Sableye coming out. So who does Azul target? Is it the Giratina? Is it the Manaphy once again? It is much harder to get the Manaphy like back-to-back when an Ordinary Rod has been exhausted, when decks are playing so few quick balls and relying so much on Battle VIP Pass. You might be able to put it back, but getting it back into play can be a challenge for these sort of decks.
Well, at least getting the Giratina V-Star to 90 hit points away from a knockout seems like the optimal play here. Remove the Manaphy from play, and then you can really do whatever you want with the rest of the damage counters.
And there we go. Now, Azul being very cautious not to overextend, with the damage being very good with his damage management. And yeah, as you mentioned, now the Radiant Greninja is a viable choice to take down, whether it's Greninja and Giratina, or Comfey and Giratina, or Sableye and Giratina. Any of those combinations gets him his last 3 prize cards.
Azul not worried about the V-Star right now, or at least going to not show that he may have an answer in that Kyogre, and going to target down some of those single prize Pokemon as we move on. And Marco going to try to line up some plays here with that Galarian Zigzagoon.
Yeah, Marco could get a double prize turn here by knocking out the Manaphy and the Comfey with the Sableye, but it is asking for a lot. He needs a way to retreat that Giratina, a Psychic Energy, and a Scoop Up Net to get those 2 prize cards. It would put him in a really good position with Azul sitting at 2 cards, no Comfey in play, but we'll have to see if he can pull that off.
Well, Azul did his best to play around this. We saw the deck size was just 2 cards before going into this Roxanne. Marco is going to find that Capture Energy for the turn.
That will allow him to retreat. However, I didn't see a Psychic Energy to be able to utilize Sableye here.
Yeah, looks like Cramorant is going to be the call. Just spit innocently to remove the Sableye from play and take an additional prize card here as things are winding down in game number 2.
Yeah, now Azul didn't immediately promote the Radiant Greninja, which I think is very telling that he doesn't have a way or an easy way to find a water energy in his hand, because a single water energy will allow Azul to take 3 prize cards. So this Flower Selecting could be very, very huge for him.
We see, looking closer and closer, the Psychic Energy was available, but going to throw that away with concealed cards. And yeah, as you mentioned, the Giratina is 190, 280, so it is 90 away already. So really already had that lined up. And now just going to see if it's available. The Clara looking, is there a way? I don't know if there should be a water, right?
Yeah, there's the water. So
is there a way to retreat?
That's the question. There we go.
I think so.
There we go.
And that is going to be it. Azul taking the 3 prize knockout here in round number 3. And that is going to be a 2-0 win against Marcos Cifuentes here in Latin America, the International Championships. Congratulations to Azul G.Griego as he moves on and secures 9 match points early on.
Now, like I said, starting off an international at 3-0, going into a lunch break, it's really, really a good feeling. That's 1/3 of the tournament. You're undefeated, and 3 more rounds, and you're into day 2, right? 3 more wins, rather. So we'll have to see how Azul keeps up his record and his deck, and see if he gets more use out of Kyogre.
Yeah, it didn't really even have to show off the secret weapon there, and was able to piece together exactly what was needed to close out there. Had the damage all along. I eventually found it, but it is going to be enough to close out there in game number 2. So congratulations to Azul as we're looking forward throughout the rest of this tournament. It was nice to see the Giratina deck popping up. We weren't sure how many of them were going to be in the field, and it looks like they're here to play, just maybe not the exact matchup that Marco was looking for.
Yeah, Giratina really, like I said, it can try to pretend to be a single prize deck, but it really doesn't do well towards the end, continuing to pretend that, right? It really wants to trade positively with some Pokemon in the early game, but it really wants to use Giratina V-Star towards the end to really take some advantageous prize trades, which, if your opponent doesn't play a single V Pokemon down, as we saw Azul throw away that Raikou V to the Lost Zone very early on, he didn't want to take any risks, and therefore the Giratina V-Star ends up just being a really awkward attacker throughout the match.
Yeah, you hope early in the game that maybe that Cramorant can take some knockouts. Sure enough, just continually running into a wall of Pokemon that had a little more hit points than necessary in those spots, and they were able to withstand. And that led to some awkward spots. We saw the Luminion come in a little earlier than necessary, didn't get to absorb any damage, and then Snorlax was attacking with the damage. So you can see situations where if those all lined up, maybe the prize exchange starts to lead into Marco's favor, but not this time.
Yeah, exactly. Marcos' starts were far from ideal. When you're using Giratina V's attack, you're not in for a good time, really, because it's almost as good as Colress's Experiment, but it is your attack for turn. So those cards in Lost Zone will not have any good immediate effect. And we saw that Marco just couldn't compensate for that slow start.
Yep, well, the one who was able to was Azul G.Griego, and we are excited to be joined with him on the stage and hear about his big win here.
Thanks so much, Kyle and Pablo. That's right, I'm joined here by Azul G.Griego, who has just moved to 3-0 here at the Latin America International Championships. Pretty good start. I gotta imagine you're feeling pretty nice.
Yeah, pretty good start so far, but a lot of work to do.
Absolutely, far from over without a doubt. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this last game. Your opponent was playing a deck that was probably not expected by your group to be as popular or super highly popular. I know you probably tested plenty against Lugia, plenty against Mew, and also the Mirror. So how did you have to adjust going into a matchup that you're maybe not as familiar with for your specific deck?
I mean, I know how Giratina works, and Giratina is generally a little bit worse off against all the Lost Box decks, so I wasn't too worried. As the game started to play out in game 1, I thought I was in a really good spot because I thought there was maybe no Sableye, no Zigzagoon, and then towards the end of game 2, the Zigzagoon came out, the Sableye came out, and the Roxanne came out, but it wasn't quite enough for him to pull it out. It's a pretty good matchup, pretty solid matchup overall, as long as I am like attacking every turn.
Yeah, and your opponent played a card that ended up being really good for them in the matchup, the Manaphy. And we saw you, there was a turn where you could have KO'd it, but you chose not to and waited until a later on turn. And we saw you continually, like, meticulously setting up the damage on the Giratina, prepping it on various different Pokemon. How far ahead do you have to think with a deck like this where you have such a heavy spread element to it?
A little bit ahead. It depends on the scenario. Sometimes you're just using Sableye, I take one prize card every single turn, and you don't really catch up to the double prize cards with Sableye ever. In that game specifically, I ignored the Manaphy for a turn because the air balloon on the Comfy was a little bit like they needed that, and there was a lot of time left in the game as well. So I knew I could attack with Sableye 2-3 more times, clean the Manaphy up, go through the Ordinary Rod, get the Manaphy again. If he did play 2 Ordinary Rod, I could have been in an awkward spot, but they whiffed the attack on that last turn. So I think even if I hadn't had game on, or they didn't whiff attack, but even if I didn't have game on the last turn, I think I had like one more turn to work with if I drew like a scoop of net. So I was still feeling pretty good.
Yeah, still had a bit of time for sure. So feeling good, I'm sure, at 3-0. Now you have a bit of history with this event. You've done very well at the Latin America Internationals before, getting second place back in 2017. Really tough finals, came down to the wire. You weren't quite able to close it out. Tell us about what it would mean to you to get back into top cut of this event.
It would mean a lot. It would also be really cool to win back-to-back ICs, so there's a lot of cool things.
There's that too, yes.
Yeah, a lot of cool things that would come with getting the dub here. It's going to be pretty tough, though. A lot of great competitors, a lot of Lugia to go through still. I haven't hit my... Oh, no, I did play Lugia round 1, so still plenty of Lugia for me to hit and go up against, but I'm going to try my best.
Well, congratulations, Azul. We'll be rooting for you, and we'll throw it back to the desk for now.
Yeah, that is very good to hear from Azul GG once more on the main stage, taking a victory as he's so accustomed to doing here in these huge tournaments. And yeah, doesn't know what's more important, returning to the finals or winning another IC. I guess those are good problems to have.
Yeah, that's definitely nice things to be worrying about. Which one should I celebrate more, right? The back-to-back wins or getting back to the top cut and finals potentially?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he can redeem some young heartbreak that he had over 5 years ago. I think he's over it by now, Chip. He's accomplished a lot in that time.
Yeah, he definitely has. Azul is definitely a very, very accomplished player in the history of the game, not just in the past few years, but that final was in 2017, I believe, or 2018. So yeah. It's been a while.
Yep, since then won plenty of regional championships, of course, the international in North America. This is his crowning achievement currently, and he would just love to continue building right now. And this looks like a pretty good deck to do that with. I am curious with how the Lugia matchup goes. Certainly we did see the tech with that Raikou V that isn't necessarily important in the matchup we just saw. It found its way to the Lost Zone basically every game. But do you think that that'd be enough to help out in the Lugia matchup, or is there a little more needed?
So I think a lot depends on which Lugia you're facing, right? If you're facing the bulkier version, they're more likely to be playing Dunsparce. If you're facing the techier version, then that's where some players are skimping on the Dunsparce or skimping on the Manaphy. Usually always plays one or the other. So I think Azul is relying quite a lot on players choosing not to play the Dunsparce, which could be a good meta call, but it is very matchup dependent. So we'll have to see if that Raikou is able to carry him in those Lugia matchups. And it seems like so far in round 1 at least, it must have done something.
Yeah, it ended up working in that opening round. And as you're saying, if players are choosing between one or the other, if there's no Manaphy, then that opens up a lot